Hello viewers, I'm the creator of this channel. I wish you all Merry Christmas. Today is another episode and I hope you enjoyed this story. Thank you. Let's begin.
I opened my eyes after my operation and nobody was there. The nurse walked over and said something that broke my heart. Your kids went home. They told me the parking cost too much money. I began to cry. Then a man in a nice suit came into my room and took my hand softly. Mrs. Thompson, I don't think you know who I am, but you bought me shoes when I had none in second grade. He was not just any person. He owned the whole hospital. What happened next made my whole life different. I'm happy you're here with me today. Stay until the end and write down which state you live in so I can know how many people heard my story. The bright white lights in my hospital room made a buzzing sound that made me feel very alone. I blinked my eyes many times because the medicine made everything look fuzzy and strange. I looked at the round clock on the wall. It said 4:15 in the afternoon. The sleepy medicine was still in my body, making my head feel cloudy and weird. But I knew one thing for sure. I was completely alone. My name is Margaret Thompson and I'm 62 years old. For hours before this moment, the doctor fixed a problem with my stomach that was making me very sick. The doctor told me it was a simple fix and nothing to worry about too much. But when you're my age, anytime a doctor cuts you open, there are scary things that might happen. I asked my 4 kids to please be here when I woke up. Robert is my oldest boy. He's 40 years old and works at a bank. He promised he would come and not go to work that day. Linda is 37 and she doesn't have a job right now. She said she would bring me a pretty plant. Danny is 33 and he sells things to people on the phone. He said okay, but he didn't seem happy about it. My youngest is Emma. She's 29 and always very busy with her computer job. She rolled her eyes but said yes. The room smelled like strong cleaning spray and something else I couldn't name. Maybe it was sadness or hurt feelings. The machines next to my bed made beeping sounds over and over. They were watching my heart, checking how much air was in my blood, and making sure my body was working right. But no machine could see the big empty hole growing in my chest that had nothing to do with my stomach operation. I turned my head very slowly to look out the window. My neck hurt from the small tube stuck in my arm. Outside I could see the rainy city of Portland looking gray and wet like it always does. Cars were moving around the hospital parking area. People were walking to see their family members who were sick or hurt. Where were the people who belonged to me? Mrs. Thompson. A voice made me stop thinking sad thoughts. I looked over and saw a young nurse with sweet eyes and red hair tied back with a rubber band. Her work clothes had pictures of happy dogs all over them, which seemed silly in such a serious place. Yes, that's me. My voice came out very quiet and scratchy because of the breathing tube they had put down my throat during the operation. She walked closer to my bed with a smile that looked worried. How do you feel right now? Does anything hurt? Do you feel sick to your stomach? I shook my head a tiny bit. Where are my children? Did they leave me any kind of message or note? The nurse's smile went away fast. She looked down at the computer tablet in her hands and then looked back at me. Her face showed she felt bad for me. Well, they were sitting in the waiting area while you were having your operation. But now she stopped talking. In that quiet moment my heart machine started beeping faster and louder. They left around 2 hours ago. The man at the front desk told me what they said. She stopped again because she didn't know how to tell me nicely. Please just say it. Tell me what happened. My voice was stronger now, but my hands started shaking like leaves. He told me they said the parking money was costing too much and they would come back to check on you later. Those words felt like someone had hit me very hard in my stomach. Parking money was too expensive. I stared at her because I was sure I heard wrong words. I'm sorry, what did you just tell me? The nurse's face turned pink and red. I'm very sorry, Mrs. Thompson. Maybe I should not have said that. I'm really sure they'll come back very soon. Sometimes people need to go take care of important things or get some fresh air outside or eat some food. But her voice got quieter and quieter because both of us knew she was making up nice reasons for something that was not nice at all. My 4 children. The 4 people I gave birth to and loved with my whole heart and worked so hard for all these years. They left me all alone after a big stomach operation because they did not want to pay money for parking their cars. The crying started suddenly without any warning. Not the quiet, gentle tears of an older woman, but the loud, choking sobs of someone whose heart was breaking into a million pieces. And this broken heart had nothing to do with being sick or having surgery. The nurse grabbed the box of soft tissues from the table next to my bed. Her face showed she felt sorry for me and embarrassed about what she had to tell me. "Mrs. Thompson, please try to calm down and stop crying. Your body needs to rest and heal right now. Can I call someone else to come be with you? Maybe another family member or a good friend?" Could not talk. Could not stop the tears. Could not understand how I was 62 years old lying in a hospital bed after the doctors cut me open and my own children left me because of maybe $25 or $30 for parking. While I cried, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway outside my room. Big heavy footsteps that sounded strong and sure. The footsteps stopped right at my door. The nurse looked up and her face changed to look more professional and ready to work. "Excuse me, sir," a deep, kind voice said from the doorway. "Is this the room for Mrs. Margaret Thompson?" I wiped my wet eyes with the back of my hand, trying to see who was talking through my tears. A very tall man wearing an expensive black suit stood in my doorway. He looked like he was maybe 55 years old with hair that was black and gray mixed together. He had warm brown eyes behind nice glasses with gold edges. Everything about him looked successful and important. His suit jacket fit him perfectly. He carried a fancy briefcase made of real leather. The nurse stood up straight and tall. "Yes, this is her room, but visiting time rules say." "It's okay," the man said quietly as he walked into my room. His voice was calm, but you could tell he was someone used to being in charge. "Mrs. Thompson, my name is James Park. You probably don't remember me at all, but..." He stopped talking for a second and his voice sounded like he might cry. "You bought me winter shoes when mine had holes in them back in second grade." I stared at him, feeling confused and my sadness mixing with wonder. Second grade. That would have been when I was working as a helper at Lincoln Elementary School to make extra money for my family. I was only 17 years old then, but I could not remember his face or name. He saw that I looked confused and he stepped closer to my hospital bed. His hands were folded together in front of him very politely and respectfully. "Mrs. Thompson, you helped so many kids over the years that I know you can't remember all of them. But I remember you like it was yesterday. You saved my whole life." The nurse looked back and forth between me and him with confusion on her face. "Sir, if you're not her immediate family member, then I have to tell you that, actually," James said, and his voice changed to sound more like a boss but still gentle and kind. "I am the person who owns this entire hospital." My tears stopped completely, like someone had turned off a water faucet. I blinked hard because I was sure the sleepy medicine was making me see things that weren't real. "You own what?" The nurse's eyes got very big and wide. She quickly said something about needing to check on other sick people, and almost ran out of my room mumbling words I couldn't hear. James watched her leave and then turned back to look at me with a small sad smile on his face. "May I please sit down in that chair?" he asked while pointing to the chair beside my bed. I nodded my head yes, because I could not find any words to say. He sat down very carefully and put his expensive briefcase on the floor next to his shiny black shoes. For a moment he just looked at me with those kind eyes that seemed familiar now, even though I couldn't remember them on a little boy's face from so many years ago. "I have been searching and searching for you for many, many years," he said in a quiet voice. "Ever since I finished college and started my job as a doctor and then started buying hospitals, I always wondered what happened to the school helper lady who made sure a poor little boy had shoes without holes so his feet wouldn't freeze in the winter snow." My heart monitor machine started beeping faster again, but this time it wasn't because I was upset and sad. It was because I felt confused and hopeful and something else I couldn't figure out what it was. "I don't understand what you're saying," I whispered. "James Park. I'm so sorry, but I can't remember you." "You wouldn't remember me," he said softly and kindly. "I was just one of many, many children you helped back then. And also my name used to be James Miller. A family adopted me and gave me their last name Park when I was 11 years old." He stopped talking and his hands squeezed together tight in his lap. Mrs. Thompson, do you remember a little boy who never had money for anything? A boy who was so skinny his clothes hung off his body like they were 3 sizes too big. A boy whose shoes had such big holes in them that snow would get inside and make his socks wet. Slowly, like clouds moving away from the sun, a picture started forming in my mind. A small skinny boy with messy black hair that looked like nobody ever brushed it or cut it right. Big brown eyes that looked sad and scared. Clothes that were dirty and torn. And shoes with the bottoms falling off so you could see his feet through the holes. Oh my goodness, I breathed out the words. Little James. You were so quiet and so cold. So hungry and so cold. He finished the sentence for me gently. Every single day. My real parents, well, that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you saw me. You noticed a kid that everyone else pretended was invisible and you did something to help me. The memory was coming back clearer and clearer now, like wiping dirt off a window. I had been working at Lincoln Elementary to make money to help my own family pay bills and buy food. Even when I was just 17, I was already helping take care of other people and learning what it meant to give up things for the people you love. I noticed little James because he reminded me of myself. Trying so hard to be invisible and quiet. Trying not to bother anyone or be a problem. You never asked me questions or made me feel embarrassed. James continued, and his voice sounded thick like he was trying not to cry. You never made me feel like I was poor trash or a charity case. You just found a way to make sure I had shoes that kept my feet warm and dry. You told me the school had extra shoes left over from Lost and found that nobody claimed. You made it seem like you were doing me a favor by letting me take them so they wouldn't go to waste. I remembered it now. How I would find shoes at thrift stores or yard sales for just a few dollars. How I would tell little James that some kid forgot their gym shoes and never came back for them. How his whole face would light up like I had given him $1 million when really I had just given him warm, dry shoes. Little James, I said, and fresh new tears started falling down my face. You were just a baby. You were so thin and your feet were so cold and red. He reached out his hand and gently took my hand in his. The warm feeling of another human touching me with kindness after hours and hours of cold loneliness almost made me start crying all over again. Mrs. Thompson, he said very softly. When I woke up this morning, I had no idea that today would be the day I would finally get to say thank you. When my assistant person who helps me told me there was a Margaret Thompson having surgery here at my hospital, I had to come see if it was really truly you. I squeezed his hand tight. This successful grown-up man who used to be a poor freezing little boy I tried to help. Cannot believe this is real. Look at you now. You became a doctor. You own a whole hospital. Because of you, he said with simple truth in his voice. Because one person showed me that kind people exist in this world. Because someone made me feel like I was worth something and deserved to be helped. We sat there not talking for a little while. His hand felt warm in mine. The machines kept beeping their steady beep 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 sounds, keeping track of time passing. Outside the window, the Portland sky was getting darker as afternoon turned to evening. But somehow my hospital room felt brighter and warmer than it had felt all day long. Mrs. Thompson, James said carefully, like he was being very gentle. I noticed when I came in that you were alone in this room. Is there nobody here with you today? And just like that, all the pain and hurt came rushing back into my heart like a giant wave of cold water. The truth of what had happened crashed down on me again. It felt even worse now because this unexpected kindness from a stranger who wasn't really a stranger made it so much more clear how wrong my children had acted. My kids, I said, and my voice broke into pieces. They left me here. They said parking cost too much money. James's hand squeezed mine tighter, and I saw something flash across his face fast like lightning. It might have been anger, or it might have been shock and disbelief. When he talked, his voice was very carefully controlled, like he was trying hard not to show his feelings. I see, he said quietly. Well, then I'm very glad I came here today. Because, Mrs. Thompson, I made a promise to myself a very long time ago. If I ever found the woman who saved that freezing cold little boy, I would make sure she was never ever alone when she needed someone the most. James stayed with me until the nurses changed shifts that evening. For the first time since waking up, I did not feel abandoned and forgotten. He told the kitchen workers to bring up dinner for both of us. Real actual good food, not the normal terrible hospital food. We ate slowly and carefully while he told me his whole story about going from that freezing hungry second grader to the man sitting next to my hospital bed. After the Park family adopted me, he said while cutting his chicken into small neat pieces, everything in my life changed completely. They gave me a stable home and paid for good schools and loved me like I was their real son. But I never ever forgot those 2 years at Lincoln Elementary. I never forgot being so cold my feet felt numb. And I never forgot the school helper lady who made sure I had shoes. I picked at my own food, still feeling overwhelmed by everything that had happened today. I just did what anybody would do for a kid who needed help. No, James said firmly and put down his fork. That is not true and we both know it. Mrs. Thompson, may I call you Margaret instead? I nodded, feeling shy suddenly. This important, successful man was treating me with more respect and care than my own children had shown me. Margaret, do you remember how you paid for those shoes? I thought back, trying to remember. I had my helper salary from the school. It was not very much money, but $3, he said quietly. That's what a pair of used shoes cost at the thrift store back in 1980. You were making about $200 a month as a school helper. Do you know what spending $3 every few months meant? I shook my head, but something uncomfortable was starting to stir in my memory, like waking up from a bad dream. It meant you were spending a big part of your paycheck on shoes for me. Kid you barely knew. A kid whose own parents didn't care if his feet froze. The memory hit me hard, like someone had thrown something at my chest. I had forgotten, or maybe I made myself forget, how tight money was back then. I was 17, trying to help my own family pay rent and buy groceries. And yes, I had been spending big chunks of my small paycheck on shoes for a boy who reminded me too much of myself. I had worn the same old worn-out sneakers for 3 years straight so James could have warm boots. I remember now, I whispered. I remember my feet being cold too. But you were so little and you looked so lost and scared, he finished my sentence. I was lost, Margaret. And you found me and helped me. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out something that made my heart skip a beat. It was an old dirty pair of small brown winter boots. The kind that lace up high. They were worn and faded and the leather was cracked. These were the last boots you bought me, he said, holding them like they were made of gold. Right before the school year ended and I moved to a different school. Before I never saw you again. I took the small boots with shaking hands. I remembered boots like these. Remembered the feel of them. Remembered thinking they would keep a little boy's feet warm and dry. Why? Yes. Why did you keep old boots all these years? Because they meant hope, he said simply, and his voice was full of emotion. When the world felt dark and scary and I thought nobody cared if I lived or died, I would look at those boots and remember. I would remember that someone had noticed me. Someone thought I was important enough to spend money on. New tears threatened to spill out, but these felt different. They felt cleaner, somehow, like washing away old dirt. James the First had no idea. I just saw a cold child and you helped without thinking twice about it. You didn't expect anything back from me. He leaned forward a little bit. Do you know what I did with that lesson you taught me? I shook my head side to side. I became a doctor because I wanted to help people the same way you helped me. First I worked with sick kids, then I moved to running hospitals so I could help even more people on a much bigger scale. And every single business decision I have ever made and every policy I have created in my hospitals has been guided by one simple question. What would Margaret do? The heavy weight of his words settled over me like a warm blanket. This successful, important man who owned hospitals had been carrying my influence with him for decades like a treasure. While I had been struggling to raise my 4 kids and working multiple jobs and barely making enough money to survive, my simple act of buying shoes had been growing into something I never could have imagined or dreamed of. I built my first medical clinic in a poor neighborhood. James continued talking. Free winter coat and shoe program for kids whose families couldn't pay for them. Then I added full medical services. Now I own 6 hospitals across Oregon and Washington, and every single one has a program to make sure no child goes without warm clothes or shoes during winter. I stared at him, feeling like my brain couldn't hold all this information. Because of winter boots. Because of you, he corrected me gently. Because you taught a freezing little boy that kindness and goodness exist even when the world feels mean and cruel. We sat in comfortable silence for a minute. The hospital's evening sounds settled around us like a soft blanket. Somewhere down the hall a baby was making crying sounds. Elevator bells were dinging softly. Normal sounds of life continuing and people being taken care of. "James," I said finally. "Can I ask you something? Anything you want to ask? How did you find me? I mean, today of all days. After all these years of searching, how did you know I was here in this hospital right now?" His face got a little more serious looking. "I have had a standing request with several private investigation companies for the past 12 years. Any time a Margaret Thompson of the right age appeared in public records anywhere in Oregon or Washington, they would tell me about it. When you signed the papers to have surgery here, it set off an alert on my phone. You have been looking for me for 12 years. Longer actually," he said. "But I only had enough money and resources to really search hard for the past 12 years. He stopped talking and studied my face carefully like he was trying to read my mind. "Margaret, I know this might sound like I was invading your privacy, but I have learned quite a lot about your life. I wanted to make absolutely sure I had found the right person before I came to see you." Cold chill ran down my back, making me shiver. "What kind of things did you learn about me?" James's jaw got tight and his face looked angry for just a second. "I know you have had a very difficult, hard life. 4 children. Got divorced when they were young. You worked multiple jobs to support them and give them food and clothes. Cleaning office buildings at night. Substitute teaching during the day. Weekend shifts at a grocery store checkout line." Each detail he said felt like a small punch to my chest. My whole life laid out so simply and plainly. All those years of being so tired I could barely stand. All that struggle and hard work summed up in just a few sentences. "I know you have been living on a fixed income since you retired," he continued, and his voice was gentle but his eyes were getting harder and angrier looking. "Social Security checks and a small pension payment from the school district. About $1,050 a month total." I nodded my head, feeling embarrassed and ashamed. It was not very much money, but it was enough for my tiny apartment and basic needs like food and electric bills. Just barely enough, but it was enough. "And I know," James said, and his voice dropped lower and quieter, "that even though you have so very little money, you have been helping your children pay their bills for years and years. Robert's bank job that almost failed 4 years ago. You took out a loan against your pension to give him money to save it. Linda's credit card debt from when she could not find a job for 9 months. You have been making the monthly minimum payments on her cards. Danny's new truck down payment last year. That was your money too. Emma's fancy computer equipment for her home office. You paid for half of that." My face burned hot with shame and embarrassment. How did he know all these private things? And why did hearing it all spoken out loud make it sound so pathetic and sad? "How do you know all this private information? Financial records and bank statements are fairly easy to trace and follow when you know what you are looking for," he said, but not in a mean way. "Margaret, I am not judging you or thinking badly of you. I understand the feeling and desire to help your children. But I have also learned some other things that worry me very much." The way he said those words made my stomach clench tight with fear. "What other things did you learn?" James was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking hard about what words to use. When he spoke, his voice was careful and controlled, like a doctor giving bad news. "I know that none of your children have come to visit you in the past 8 months before today. I know that Robert has not returned your phone calls from last month when you were having bad chest pains and trouble breathing. I know that Linda borrowed $1,500 from you in January and has not spoken to you or called you since then." Each fact he said was like a small knife cut. Precise and painful. I wanted to defend my children and explain that they were busy people with their own lives and their own problems, and I understood why they couldn't visit. But the words would not come out of my mouth. "And I know," James said, and his voice got softer with sympathy and pity, "that when you called each of them on the phone to tell them about today's surgery, you had to leave voicemail messages. None of them called you back until this morning, just a few hours before your operation." The tears came again, but this time they felt different. Not just sadness, but a deep, bone-tired recognition of truths I had been avoiding and ignoring for years. "They are busy," I whispered. The same excuse I had been making to myself for so long. "They have their own families and their own problems to deal with." Margaret, James said gently but firmly. When I was 9 years old and the Park family adopted me, I made a promise to myself. I promised that if I ever had the chance to repay your kindness, I would do it. But I also promised that I would never let anyone treat another person the way my real biological parents treated me. He leaned forward and his eyes were intense but still kind. I have been watching your children's behavior patterns for months now. Ever since I confirmed that you were the Margaret Thompson I was looking for. And what I have seen. He paused, clearly struggling with how much he should tell me. What I have seen worries me very deeply and makes me concerned for you. My heart was racing now. The monitor beside my bed was beeping faster and louder. What do you mean by that? James reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a brown folder. He held it in his hands like it was very heavy. Margaret, I want you to know that everything I am about to tell you and show you comes from a place of caring about you. I owe you my life, and I will not stand by quietly and watch people take advantage of your kindness the way people took advantage of mine. He opened the folder and I could see papers inside with official-looking letterheads and logos. 4 weeks ago, he said carefully and slowly, Robert made an appointment with an elder care lawyer. A lawyer who helps with old people. Linda has been looking up information online about nursing homes in your area. Danny has been asking his friends about the legal process for getting someone declared mentally incompetent. And Emma has been researching how to get power of attorney over a parent. The whole world seemed to tilt sideways like I was on a boat in rough water. I gripped the bed rail tight, certain I was going to throw up and be sick. That cannot be right, I breathed out. They would not do that. They are my children. They love me. Malcolm's expression was infinitely gentle and sad, but his words cut deep into my heart like sharp knives. I'm sure they do love you in their own way. But Margaret, I think there are some things about your children's finances and their plans for you that you need to know about. The folder in James's hand seemed to grow heavier as the seconds ticked by. I stared at it. Part of me wanted to grab it and throw it across the room. Part of me needed to know the truth no matter how much it would hurt me. Maybe I should not show you this while you are recovering from surgery, James said, noticing how distressed and upset I looked. The monitors beside my bed were beeping rapidly, now showing my elevated heart rate. No, I said firmly, surprising myself with how strong my voice sounded. I need to know the truth. I have spent too many years making excuses for them and pretending everything is fine. Haven't I? James nodded slowly, then opened the folder all the way. What I am about to show you I did not get illegally or by breaking any laws. It is all public record information or information that was shared with me by people who were concerned and worried about the pattern they were seeing. He pulled out the first paper. It was a printed email. This is from the elder care lawyer that Robert went to see. The lawyer felt very uncomfortable with what Robert was asking, and she reached out to me through people we both know professionally. I took the paper with hands that were shaking like leaves in wind. The email was sent to someone named Dr. Patricia Monroe at Elder Law Services. My eyes tried to read the words, but they seemed to swim and blur together. Then one paragraph jumped out at me and I could see it clearly. Mr. Thompson asked specifically about the timeline and legal steps for declaring an elderly parent mentally incompetent. He showed particular interest in situations where the parent gives away too much money to charities or other people and makes poor financial decisions that will negatively affect the family's inheritance after the parent dies. The words hit me like someone had slapped me hard across the face. I read the paragraph again, hoping I had misunderstood or read it wrong. But the meaning was crystal clear as glass. Robert had not been asking about getting help for a mother with dementia or Alzheimer's disease. He had been asking how to legally take control of a mother who was giving away what he thought of as his money. The lawyer, James continued gently, was concerned enough about the nature and tone of his questions that she refused to take Robert as a client. That is why she reached out through professional channels. She wanted someone to know that there might be an elderly person at risk of being taken advantage of by their own family. I set the email down with fingers that were trembling and shaking. What else is there? Show me everything. James hesitated, then pulled out a second paper. This is a printout of an online conversation between Linda and one of her friends. The friend was so disturbed and upset by what Linda was saying that she took a screenshot picture of it. Eventually it made its way to me through people who knew I was looking for you. The messages were from Facebook between Linda and someone named Ashley Porter. I recognized that name. Ashley had been Linda's roommate in college many years ago. My eyes found Linda's messages, and each one felt like a dagger stabbing into my heart over and over. Mom is driving me absolutely crazy with her Bleeding Heart Act and her charity giving. Do you know she donated $400 to some homeless shelter last month? $400. While I am drowning in credit card debt that I cannot pay. She is 62 and acting like she is going to live forever and ever. Doesn't she realize that money should be going to her family? Ashley, I swear if she gives away much more there will not be anything left for us when she finally dies. Robert thinks we need to do something soon before she gets too old and starts getting scammed and tricked by every sad story beggar that comes along. We are looking into some legal options. There are ways to protect elderly people from themselves, if you know what I mean, and know the right lawyers to talk to. I could not read anymore. The phone slipped from my hands and James caught it before it could fall to the floor. The betrayal felt so complete and so total that I felt numb all over, like my whole body had gone to sleep. These were not strangers talking about some vulnerable, confused old woman. This was my daughter. The child I had given birth to and raised and sacrificed everything for. Talking about me like I was a problem that needed to be solved and managed. There is more, James said quietly. But maybe we should stop for today. Show me. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat and cold like ice. Show me everything you have. The next paper was even worse than the others. It was a credit report. My credit report with all my private financial information. Someone had requested it recently, and the request had come from Robert's bank where he works. How did he get permission to see this? I asked, even though I already suspected I knew the answer. You gave him your social security number and other personal identifying information when he helped you set up online banking on your computer last year, James said. He has been monitoring and tracking your finances without your knowledge or permission. The credit report showed absolutely everything about my money. My small savings account with $2,900. My checking account that usually had around $150 most months. The loan I had taken against my pension to help Robert's failing bank job. The ongoing monthly payments I was making on Linda's credit card debt. Even the $40 monthly donation I made to the animal rescue shelter. But there was something else that made my blood run cold. A note written in the margins in Robert's precise, neat handwriting. Unnecessary charitable giving, approximately $600 per year, could be redirected to family or saved. He has been tracking my donations, I whispered. $40 a month to help abandoned dogs and cats, and he thinks it is unnecessary money being wasted. James's jaw was tight with controlled anger that he was trying hard not to show. There is one more thing, Margaret. This one is the hardest and most painful to see, but I think you need to know about it. He pulled out his phone and showed me an audio file on the screen. This was recorded yesterday in the hospital parking lot after your children left you alone. The person who recorded it is a security guard who works here. When he heard what your children were saying, he felt obligated and duty-bound to document it and report it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone steady. But James helped me hold it as he pressed the play button. The audio was slightly muffled and hard to hear, but I could clearly recognize my children's voices talking. Robert's voice spoke first. Look, the procedure went fine and she is going to be fine and recover. There is no point in us sitting around here all day wasting time and paying $25 for parking. Linda's voice sounded next. I just feel weird and guilty about leaving her all alone like this. Danny's voice came with a laugh. She has been alone most of her life anyway, living by herself. It is not like she is going to know the difference or care that much. Robert again. The important thing is that we established and showed that we are concerned, caring children who showed up at the hospital. When the time comes to make legal decisions about her care and her money, that is what will matter to the courts and lawyers. Linda asked, when do you think that time will be? Robert answered, maybe a couple of years from now. Maybe sooner if her health gets worse and declines. The key is to start laying the groundwork now. Show a pattern of irresponsible spending. Get documentation of her making poor decisions that prove she is not capable. Danny said, like giving away money to homeless shelters and animal rescues. Robert said, exactly right. The shelter donations and the animal rescue money and the random acts of kindness she is always doing for strangers. We frame it all as early dementia and confusion about finances. Linda said, but she is not confused at all. She is just generous and kind-hearted. Robert's voice got harsh. Generous with our inheritance money, Linda. Look, that house is worth $250,000. Her savings and pension add up to another $120,000, maybe more. Do you want to watch her give it all away to every sad story and charity that comes along? Emma's voice joined in. Robert is right. We need to protect her from herself and protect our financial future at the same time. The recording continued for another 2 minutes with my children discussing me like I was a business problem that needed solving. Calculating my worth down to the exact dollar. Planning step by step how to take control of my life and my money and my decisions. When it finally ended, the silence in the hospital room felt deafening and heavy. I stared at James's phone long after the audio stopped playing. In the space of 1 hour, I had discovered that the 4 people I loved most in the whole world saw me not as a mother but as an obstacle standing between them and financial security and inheritance money. Every act of kindness I had ever shown, every dollar I had donated to help others, was seen as theft from their future wealth. They think I am losing my mind, I said finally. My voice was barely a whisper. They are planning to have me declared incompetent and unable to make decisions because I give $40 a month to help rescue animals. Margaret, James said gently. There is something else you should know. The reason they left today was not really about parking fees at all. I looked up at him, wondering what could possibly be worse than what I had already learned and heard. They went to meet with a different lawyer while you were in recovery after surgery. Someone who was more willing to help them explore their legal options. The appointment was scheduled for this afternoon while you were still unconscious. The full picture was becoming clear now, like wiping fog off a mirror. My children had not left because of parking money. They had left because they had a meeting with a lawyer about taking control of my life. While I was lying unconscious on an operating table with doctors cutting me open, they were in some lawyer's office learning the legal steps for having me declared mentally incompetent. How long have you known about all of this? Yes. I started investigating about 4 months ago when I finally confirmed you were the Margaret Thompson I had been looking for and searching for. First, I just wanted to understand your life. To see if there was a way I could quietly repay some of your kindness without disrupting your world or causing problems. He paused and ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. But the more I learned about your children's behavior, the more concerned and worried I became. The pattern was very clear. They were isolating you from other people. They were monitoring your finances without permission. And they were laying groundwork to take control of your life. Why did you not contact me sooner and tell me? James's face showed pain. 'Cause I was not sure you would believe me. And because I hoped very much that I was wrong about them. I hoped that when you really needed them most, like today, they would show their true character by being here for you and supporting you. Instead, they showed their true character by leaving you alone. Yes, they did. I leaned back against my pillows, feeling exhausted beyond anything the surgery could have caused. The betrayal was so complete and so carefully calculated that I felt like I was mourning the death of 4 people. But those 4 people had never really existed in the first place. The children I thought I had raised. The children I thought loved me. They were fantasy figures I had created in my imagination. The real Robert, Linda, Danny, and Emma were strangers who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with an inconvenient conscience attached to it. James, I said after a long silence. What happens now? What do I do? That depends on what you want to happen, Margaret. But I want you to know and understand that you are not alone in this situation. I made a promise to myself about repaying your kindness, and I meant every word of it. What kind of promise exactly? The promise that if I ever found you, I would make absolutely sure you were protected and cared for and safe. The same way you protected and cared for me when I was a freezing cold little boy. His voice grew stronger and more determined. Your children may see you as a problem to be managed and controlled. But I see you as the woman who saved my life. And I will be damned if I am going to let anyone treat you the way they are planning to treat you. For the first time since waking up from surgery, I felt something other than hurt and betrayal and sadness. I felt the tiniest glimmer of hope, like a small candle being lit in a dark room. What did you have in mind? I asked carefully. James smiled, and for just a moment I could see the grateful little boy he had once been shining through. Well, he said while reaching for his briefcase again. Turns out that owning hospitals and having good lawyers comes with certain advantages and benefits. And I plan to use every single one of them to help you. He pulled out a different folder. This one was thick with official-looking documents and papers. Margaret, how would you feel about making some major changes to your life? Changes that would ensure you are never at anyone's mercy ever again. Changes that would give you real power and control over your own future. I looked at the thick folder, then back at James's kind, determined face. Outside my window, the Portland sky was growing dark as evening became night. But somehow the room felt brighter and warmer than it had felt all day long. Tell me more, I said. And I meant it. James opened the new folder with the care and precision of a surgeon handling delicate instruments. Inside were documents that looked far more hopeful and positive than the devastating evidence I had just reviewed about my children's betrayal and plans. Margaret, he began, and his voice took on a business-like tone that somehow still managed to sound warm and caring. What I am about to propose and suggest might seem overwhelming and like too much. But I want you to know that every single suggestion I am making comes from decades of planning and preparation. Ever since I started looking for you, I have been preparing for this exact conversation. I shifted slightly in my hospital bed, wincing as the 4-tube tugged at my arm. What kind of preparation and planning? He pulled out the first document, which looked like some sort of legal contract with official seals. 7 years ago, I established something called the Margaret Thompson Foundation. It is a charitable organization dedicated to ensuring that children never go cold or hungry, and that elderly people who have spent their entire lives helping others are protected and honored in their later years. I stared at the document, seeing my name in fancy official letterhead. Felt surreal and overwhelming, like a dream. You created a foundation with my name on it. With the intention of finding you and asking your permission to use your name, James said quickly. If you had said no, I would have changed the name immediately with no questions asked. But Margaret, this foundation has been funding winter clothing programs and meal programs in schools across Oregon for 7 years now. We have helped over 15,000 children because of the inspiration you gave me as a cold, hungry little boy. The weight of his words settled over me slowly, like snow falling. While I had been struggling to pay my rent and worrying about my children's futures, James had been helping thousands of children in my honor. While my own children saw my charity as theft from their inheritance, this man had built an empire of kindness based on the simple act of buying shoes. I do not understand, I said softly. What does this foundation have to do with my situation right now? James's expression grew more serious. The foundation has substantial assets and money. Enough to ensure that you never have to worry about money ever again. And more importantly, enough to ensure that your children can never claim you are financially incompetent or unable to make sound decisions. He pulled out another document covered in numbers and figures. I am prepared to offer you a position as executive director of the foundation with an annual salary of $135,000. I nearly choked on my own spit. James, that is more money than I have ever made in my entire life combined. It is less than you deserve, he said firmly. But more importantly, it would give you financial independence and legal protection. As an actively employed executive director, no court anywhere would consider you mentally incompetent. Your children's plans would become completely impossible to execute and carry out. I felt dizzy and lightheaded, and it was not from the medication. But I do not know anything about running a foundation or managing that kind of organization. I do not have the education or experience or skills. You have something far more valuable than education or experience, James interrupted gently. You have the heart and the instincts that this foundation was built to honor and celebrate. And you will have a full professional staff to handle all the technical aspects and paperwork. Your job would be to guide the mission, to help decide which programs to fund, to be the moral compass of an organization dedicated to kindness and helping people. The irony was not lost on me. My children wanted to take control of my life because they thought I was too generous and too willing to help others. James was offering me control of a foundation specifically designed to help others on a massive scale. There is more, James continued while pulling out another set of papers. I have also purchased a home for you if you want it and choose to accept it. You what? It is in Riverside Meadows, a private gated community about 15 minutes from here. Beautiful place specifically designed for independent active adults who want freedom and independence but with available support services if needed. The home is fully paid for with no mortgage. It would be yours free and clear with no monthly housing costs ever. I felt like I was drowning in kindness after a lifetime of barely keeping my head above water financially. James, this is way too much. Cannot accept all of this. You can and you should, he said, and his voice took on the authoritative tone of someone who had built a medical empire from nothing. Margaret, let me ask you something. When you bought me shoes all those years ago, did you expect anything in return from me? Course not, I said. I just wanted to help. Then why is it so hard for you to believe that I want to help you without expecting anything in return? I did not have an answer for that question. Maybe because I had spent so many years with people who always wanted something from me. I had forgotten what unconditional kindness looked like. James pulled out a tablet computer and showed me photos of a charming one-story home with a big front porch and a garden that looked like something from a beautiful magazine. The house comes fully furnished with everything you need, but you can change anything you want and make it your own. There is a community center with activities, walking trails through the woods, and optional meal services if you don't feel like cooking. You could move in as soon as you are released from the hospital and cleared by your doctors. I studied the photos, trying to imagine myself living in this beautiful place. It looked like a dream. The kind of peaceful retirement I had never dared to hope for or imagine. What about my current apartment? What happens to that? We would handle the entire move completely and professionally. Pack everything you want to keep and bring with you. Donate what you do not need to charities. Handle all the logistics and coordination. James's voice grew softer and gentler. Margaret, I want you to understand something very important. This is not charity or pity. This is justice. You gave a freezing hungry child hope and dignity and worth. Now that child, all grown up, wants to give you security and peace and freedom. I looked at the photos again, then at James's earnest, serious face. And my children? What about them? They will be furious and angry. They will think I have lost my mind accepting help from a stranger. James's expression hardened slightly and his jaw got tight. With all due respect, Margaret, your children's opinion should not matter one bit in decisions about your own life. Especially when their primary concern seems to be preserving their inheritance rather than ensuring your happiness and well-being. He was right, and I knew it deep in my heart. But letting go of a lifetime of putting my children's needs first was not easy. Even after learning how little they actually valued me as a person. Can I ask you something? Said. Anything you want. Why now? I mean, you have been searching for me for years and years. You could have approached me at any time. Why wait until I was in the hospital? James was quiet for a long moment, clearly choosing his words very carefully. Because I needed to be absolutely sure you needed help and protection. I have been watching from a distance for months, hoping your children would step up and show kindness. Hoping they would show the same kindness you showed me. Today, when they abandoned you after surgery, I knew I could not wait any longer or stand by silently. He leaned forward slightly. And because frankly I was afraid you would refuse help if you were not in a position to see clearly how alone you really are. The honesty of his answer hit me hard like cold water. He was absolutely right. If he had approached me 6 months ago with this offer, I would have been too proud to accept it. I would have made excuses for my children's behavior and insisted I was fine on my own. There is one more thing, James said while pulling out a final document. This is entirely optional and you can ignore it completely, but I wanted to present it as a possibility for you to consider. The paper he handed me was a will. My will. Already prepared and typed up with my name and information filled in. I took the liberty of having my legal team draft this based on what I know about your current assets and your values and wishes. Obviously you can change anything or ignore it completely. but I thought it might be helpful to see your options laid out clearly on paper. I read through the document, surprised by how thorough and thoughtful it was. Instead of leaving my modest assets to my children, this will establish a scholarship fund for poor children who needed help. It donated my small house to a charity that helped single mothers. And it left specific detailed instructions for my care if I became unable to make decisions for myself. This gives my children absolutely nothing, I said, stating the obvious truth. That is correct, James said calmly. Given their apparent plan to have you declared incompetent in order to access and control your assets, this seemed like the most protective course of action for you. I set the will down and looked at James. This man who had appeared in my darkest hour like an answer to a prayer I had not even known I was praying. You have thought of absolutely everything, haven't you? I have tried my very best to, Margaret. I want you to have real choices. Real actual choices. Not just the illusion of choice while other people pull strings and control your life behind the scenes. He paused and his voice got very serious. But I need you to know and understand that none of this comes with strings attached or expectations. If you want to reconcile with your children, if you want to leave them your inheritance, if you want to live modestly in your current apartment, I will support whatever you decide. Even if you think I am making a mistake. Even then. Because that is what you did for me all those years ago. You helped without trying to control the outcome or get something back. I leaned back against my pillows, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. Financial security. Beautiful home. Meaningful work. Legal protection from my children's schemes. It was everything I had never dared to dream of. Being offered by someone who owed me nothing but had chosen to remember everything. James, I said finally. What happens if I say yes to all of this and then my children try to fight it? Try to claim you are manipulating me or taking advantage of a confused old woman. His smile was sharp and confident. Let them try. I own 6 hospitals. I employ some of the best lawyers in the state. And I have documented evidence of their own plans to manipulate you. More importantly, you will be employed and housed and surrounded by people who can testify to your mental competency and independence. He pulled out a business card and handed it to me. This is my personal attorney, Rebecca Chen. She specializes in elder law and protection from financial exploitation. She has been fully briefed on your situation and is prepared to represent you immediately if needed. I took the card, feeling its weight as a symbol of protection I had never had before in my entire life. You really have thought of absolutely everything. I have had 12 years to think about it and plan, James said simply. Margaret, I know this is a tremendous amount to process while you are recovering from surgery. You do not have to decide anything today or tomorrow. But I want you to know that these offers stand firm regardless of your timeline or how long you need to think. A gentle knock at the door interrupted our conversation. The same nurse from earlier peered into the room, looking apologetic and uncomfortable. Mrs. Thompson, I am sorry to interrupt, but there are 4 people here who say they are your children. They would like to see you now. My heart rate monitor immediately started beeping faster and louder. James noticed and placed a calming, reassuring hand on my arm. It is completely your choice, he said quietly. You can see them or you can ask them to come back tomorrow when you are feeling stronger and better. I looked at the documents spread across my bed. The foundation papers. The photos of my potential new home. The will that would protect everything I had worked for from children who saw me as a problem to be managed. Then I looked at James, whose presence had transformed my worst day into a day of unexpected hope and possibility. Send them in, I said, surprising myself with how calm and strong I sounded. It is time to see what they have to say for themselves. But as the nurse disappeared to get my children, I carefully gathered all of James's documents and handed them back to him. Can you hold on to these for now and keep them safe? Of course, he said while tucking everything back into his briefcase. Do you want me to leave the room? I considered this carefully. Part of me wanted the protection and safety of his presence. But another part needed to face my children alone. To see if I could detect any genuine remorse or concern in their behavior without him there. Would you mind waiting just outside the door in case I need you? James stood up and straightened his expensive suit jacket. I will be right outside the door. If you need anything at all, just call my name and I will come immediately. As he moved toward the door, I called out softly, "James." He turned back to look at me. "Thank you. Thank you for everything. For remembering me. For caring. For giving me choices and options." His smile was gentle and warm and full of emotion. "Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for teaching a freezing cold hungry little boy that kindness and goodness exist in the world. Everything good in my life started with that simple lesson you taught me." As he stepped into the hallway, I could hear voices approaching and getting louder. Robert's confident, authoritative tone. Linda's nervous, anxious laugh. Danny's attempt at humor. Emma's impatient sighing. My children coming to visit their mother after abandoning her to go meet with lawyers about taking control of her life and money. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling stronger than I had felt in years. It was time to see what they wanted from me this time. The sound of my children's voices grew louder as they approached my hospital room. I felt my heart rate spike in a way that had nothing to do with my recent surgery. Through the thin hospital walls, I could hear Robert talking in his usual bossy tone. The one he had learned from his father and perfected in his banking career. "I still think we should have stayed this morning," Linda was saying. Her voice carrying that familiar note of worry and anxiety. What if something had gone wrong during surgery? "Nothing went wrong," Robert replied curtly and dismissively. "The procedure was routine and simple. We verified that with the surgeon before we left her." Emma's laugh was sharp and mean. "Come on, Linda. She's totally fine. She's always fine no matter what. Mom is like a weed in a garden. You cannot kill her no matter what you do." Their casual cruelty hit me like a fist to the stomach, even though I had heard worse on James's recording. But hearing it now, knowing they were about to walk into my room and pretend to care, made it somehow more painful and worse. The door opened and my 4 children filed into the room. Robert leading the way as he always did, like he was in charge. He was wearing his best suit. The dark blue one he saved for important bank meetings. His expression was set in what I had come to recognize as his dealing with difficult people face. Linda followed behind him, clutching a small bunch of cheap flowers that looked like they had been purchased from the hospital gift shop 30 seconds ago. Danny brought up the rear, already checking his phone as he walked into the room. Emma was texting someone and barely looked up. "Mom," Linda exclaimed with fake forced brightness, rushing to my bedside. "How are you feeling right now? We have been so worried about you." I studied her face carefully, looking for any sign of genuine concern beneath the performance and act she was putting on. Her makeup was perfect. Her hair was freshly styled and curled. If she had been worried enough to stay at the hospital, she had certainly taken plenty of time to fix herself up before returning. "I am fine," I said quietly while accepting the wilting flowers she thrust toward me. They were already dying. Probably had been sitting under the gift shop's bright lights for many days. "Thank you for these flowers." Robert positioned himself at the foot of my bed. His hands clasped behind his back in a pose that screamed authority and control over everything. "We spoke with Dr. Harrison before we came in to see you. He said the surgery went perfectly with no complications at all." "That is what I understood too," I replied while watching his face very carefully. There was something different about his expression. A tightness around his eyes that suggested he was calculating and planning something. Emma finally looked up from her phone long enough to acknowledge that I existed in the room. "You look okay, Mom. I mean, considering you just had major stomach surgery and everything." "Thank you, Emma. That is very comforting to hear." If she caught the dryness and sarcasm in my tone, she did not show it at all. She was already scrolling through her social media again. Her attention span for family obligations apparently exhausted by that single comment. "So," Robert said while settling into the chair James had been sitting in earlier, "we need to talk about some things. Practical, important things about your future. Here it comes," I thought. The real reason for their visit today. Linda perched nervously on the edge of the second chair. Her hands clasped tightly in her lap like she was praying. "We have been thinking, Mom. And we are very concerned about you living alone. Especially after what happened today with your surgery. What about today concerns you so much?" I asked, keeping my voice level and calm. Robert leaned forward slightly like he was about to explain something to a child. Mom, you are 62 years old. You just had stomach surgery. What if something bad happens when you are at home all alone? What if you fall down or have another medical episode? I have my medical alert pendant that I wear, I said. And my neighbors check on me regularly. Mrs. Kim is 79 years old, Danny said without looking up from his phone. What is she going to do if you have a real medical emergency? Call 911 and then stand around panicking. Linda shot him a warning look to be quiet. What Danny means is that we think you might be more comfortable and safer somewhere with professional medical staff on site. People who are trained to handle medical emergencies and situations. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold hospital air conditioning. They were already laying the groundwork and foundation. Already starting the conversation that would lead to me being moved somewhere for my own good and safety. Are you talking about putting me in a nursing home? Asked directly. Not a nursing home, Robert said quickly. More like an assisted living community. Somewhere nice and pleasant where you would have your own apartment but with support services available 24 hours. I see, I said while looking from one face to another. These 4 people who shared my DNA but seemed like complete strangers to me. And have you looked into any specific places or facilities? Linda's cheeks flushed pink with embarrassment. We have done some preliminary research online. Just to understand what the options are. There are some really lovely communities that specialize in active independent seniors who just need a little extra help. Active seniors who just had stomach surgery. Yes. Mom, don't be so dramatic, Robert said, and his patience was already wearing thin. We are talking about your safety and well-being. As your children, we have a responsibility and duty to make sure you are properly cared for. The word responsibility coming from his mouth was almost laughable and absurd. Where was their responsibility this morning when I woke up alone and terrified and crying? Where was their responsibility during the past 8 months when they had barely called or visited me once? I appreciate your concern, I said carefully and slowly. But I am not ready to give up my independence and freedom yet. Emma finally looked up from her phone. Her expression suggesting I had said something incredibly stupid. Mom, independence is great when you are young and healthy. But you are not young anymore. And clearly your health is becoming a serious issue that needs to be addressed. My health is becoming an issue. I repeated her words. I had one problem with my stomach. It has been fixed by the surgery. Dr. Harrison expects a full, complete recovery. For now, Robert said ominously like he knew dark secrets. But Mom's stomach problems and digestive issues are often chronic and recurring. This is just the beginning of health decline. You need to start thinking realistically about your future and what comes next. I felt anger beginning to burn hot in my chest. What I need, I said, is to understand why my children are more concerned with managing and controlling my future than supporting me through my present situation. The room fell completely silent. Linda's cheap flowers rustled as she shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Danny's phone buzzed with a notification that for once he actually ignored. Robert's jaw tightened, and I could see him struggling hard to maintain his professional banker composure and control. That is not fair, Mom, Linda said finally in a hurt voice. We are here now. I came to see you. You are here now, I agreed. Where were you 5 hours ago when I woke up alone and crying and terrified? We explained that situation, Robert said stiffly and defensively. The parking money issue. $25, I interrupted him. The parking fee was $25 for the whole day. You left your mother alone after major surgery to avoid paying $25. Danny's phone buzzed again, and this time he answered it immediately like he was grateful for the escape. Sorry, I really have to take this call. It is an important client who might buy something. He stepped out into the hallway, already deep in animated conversation about some sales deal that was apparently far more important than his mother's recovery after surgery. Robert watched him leave with obvious irritation and annoyance. Then he turned back to me with a stern expression. Mom, you are clearly very upset and emotional right now. And I understand that surgery is stressful and scary. But you are not thinking clearly or rationally about the bigger picture of your situation. What bigger picture is that, Robert? Yes. Your finances and money. He said bluntly without any sugarcoating. Do you have any idea what this surgery is going to cost you? Even with Medicare insurance coverage, what ongoing medical care and follow-up appointments will cost? You cannot afford to live independently and pay for all the medical care you are going to need going forward. There it was laid bare and obvious. The real concern driving everything. Not my health or happiness or well-being, but my money and how my medical expenses might negatively affect their inheritance. I see, I said quietly. And I suppose you have a solution already figured out for this financial problem. Linda leaned forward eagerly like a dog hoping for treats. Actually, we do have a solution. If you were to move to an assisted living facility, you could sell your house. Use that money to pay for your care there. It would probably last 5 or 6 years. Maybe longer if you choose a more modestly priced community instead of an expensive fancy one. And after that money runs out completely. Yes. David shrugged like it was no big deal. Medicaid takes over. The state government pays for everything. But by then you would be settled and established in a care routine and facility. I stared at them both, marveling at how thoroughly and carefully they had worked this all out in advance. Sell my house. Spend down all my assets and savings. Then become a ward of the state. All very neat and tidy and organized. And coincidentally, it would eliminate any inheritance they might otherwise have to wait patiently for. Have you spoken to anyone professional about this plan? Yes. Any lawyers or financial advisors who could help navigate these kinds of decisions? Robert's eyes flickered almost imperceptibly for just a fraction of a second. We have done extensive research and consulted with some people who understand elder care law and financial planning. You see. Anyone specific I should know about by name? Linda looked confused by my question, like she did not understand why I was asking. But Robert's expression grew more guarded and suspicious. Just some preliminary consultations and information gathering. Nothing formal or official yet. A soft knock at the door interrupted our tense conversation. James stepped back into the room. His presence immediately changed the entire energy and atmosphere. He was still wearing his expensive tailored suit, still carrying his leather briefcase. But now there was something different about his demeanor and bearing. More formal, more professional, more powerful. "Excuse me," he said very politely. "Mrs. Thompson, I wanted to check on how you are feeling before I head home for the evening." Robert stood up immediately. His banker instincts clearly picking up on James's obvious wealth and authority and power. "I'm sorry, sir. Are you one of my mother's doctors?" James smiled, but it was not the warm smile he had shared with me earlier. This was his business smile. Polite but distant and professional. "I am James Park. I own this hospital and 4 others in the region." The effect was immediate and dramatic, like flipping a light switch. Robert's entire posture changed instantly. His voice becoming embarrassingly obsequious and bootlicking. Sarah actually stood up from her chair as if she were meeting the president. Even Emma, who had wandered back into the room still holding her phone, suddenly looked interested and put it away. "Mr. Park," Robert said while extending his hand for a handshake. "Robert Thompson. Adrienne's oldest son. This is my sister Linda and my sister Emma and my brother Danny. We cannot thank you enough for the excellent, outstanding care our mother has received at your hospital." James shook hands politely with each of them, his expression remaining neutral and unreadable. "Your mother received the same excellent care we provide to all our patients without exception. Though I must say she is quite a remarkable and special woman with an amazing history." "Oh yes," Linda gushed enthusiastically. "Mom has always been so special and wonderful. We are so grateful and thankful she is in such good, capable hands here." I watched this performance with a mixture of disgust and sick fascination. These were the exact same children who had left me alone after surgery, who had spent the morning meeting with lawyers about having me declared incompetent. But put them in front of someone wealthy and powerful and successful, and suddenly they transformed into devoted, grateful, loving children. "Mr. Park," Robert said, and his voice took on what I recognized as his networking tone for making business connections. "I don't suppose you have a few minutes to discuss our mother's situation and future? We are trying to make some important decisions about her ongoing care and living arrangements." James's expression did not change at all, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes showing displeasure. What kind of decisions are you trying to make? Well, Robert said, we are concerned about her living alone given her age and now this serious health issue. We are looking into some assisted living options for her safety. See, James said. His voice was carefully neutral and gave nothing away. And what does Mrs. Thompson think about these options you are considering? Robert glanced at me quickly, then back at James. She has been resistant to the idea and fighting us. But we think it is critically important to plan ahead and be proactive rather than reactive when a crisis happens. Proactive, James repeated the word thoughtfully. Yes, I can see how that would be important for planning. He paused, seeming to consider something carefully. You know, it is interesting. In my experience running healthcare facilities and hospitals, I have found that the patients who do best and recover fastest are those who feel they have control and input over their own care decisions. Linda nodded eagerly like a bobblehead. Oh, absolutely, Mr. Park. We want Mom to feel like she is part of the decision-making process and included in everything. Course you do, James said smoothly. Though I have also noticed over the years that family members sometimes have very different priorities than the patients themselves. It is understandable. Everyone wants what they think is best. But there was something in his tone. A subtle edge and sharpness that made Robert shift uncomfortably from foot to foot. Well, yes, Robert said defensively. Sometimes elderly parents do not fully understand or comprehend the complexities of their situation and what is best for them. James nodded slowly and thoughtfully. That can certainly happen in some cases. Though I have found that people tend to be far more capable of making good sound decisions when they have complete, accurate information and appropriate support systems in place. He turned to look at me and his expression warmed noticeably. Mrs. Thompson, how are you feeling about your recovery? Do you feel confident about managing your care going forward? I met his eyes, understanding that this was far more than just a casual, polite question. I am feeling much stronger, actually. More confident than I have felt in a very long time. That is wonderful to hear, James said warmly. Then he turned back to my children. Well, I should let you continue your family visit. Mrs. Thompson, please do not hesitate to call me if you need anything at all. Anything whatsoever. The emphasis on the last word was not lost on anyone in the room. Robert's expression showed puzzlement and confusion, trying hard to understand why the hospital owner would take such an intensely personal interest in his mother. Linda looked flustered and overwhelmed, clearly intimidated by James's obvious authority and power. Emma was already pulling her phone back out. After James left, the room felt smaller somehow, like the air had been sucked out. Robert sat back down, but his earlier confidence had been badly shaken. That was very interesting, he said finally while trying to sound casual. I wonder why the hospital owner would take such a personal interest in your specific case, Mom. I shrugged, keeping my face and expression completely neutral. Maybe he is just very hands-on with patient care and likes to check on people personally. Maybe, Robert said. But his banker-accountant mind was clearly working overtime, trying to figure out what angle he had missed, what information he did not have. Sarah looked confused by the entire strange interaction. He seemed very nice, very successful and important. Very rich, Emma added while finally contributing something useful to the conversation. An idea was forming in my mind, growing stronger and clearer by the minute. I looked at my 4 children. Robert, with his constantly calculating mind, already trying to figure out how to leverage this new connection for his benefit. Linda, with her perpetual anxiety about money and social status. Danny, with his complete indifference to everything except his own immediate wants. Emma, with her obsession with her phone and social media. You know, I said slowly and carefully, maybe you are right about planning ahead for my future. All 4 of them turned to look at me with renewed attention and interest, like dogs hearing a treat bag open. I should probably think more seriously about my future, I continued. Make some significant changes while I am still healthy enough and mentally sharp enough to make good decisions. Robert leaned forward, sensing victory was near. That is exactly what we have been trying to tell you, Mom. Yes, I said thoughtfully and carefully. I should definitely make some major changes to my life. But the changes I was thinking about were not even close to the ones they were hoping for. 8 months later, I stood on the big wraparound porch of my new home in Riverside Meadows. I was watching the morning fog lift slowly off the community's beautiful lake. The house that James had shown me in photographs was even more stunning and beautiful in real life. Warm wooden floors, big windows that filled every room with natural sunlight, and a kitchen where I had learned to cook for pleasure and joy rather than just necessity and survival. The transition and move had been smoother than I ever could have imagined possible. Within 1 week of leaving the hospital, James's professional team had handled every single detail of my move. My old apartment had been professionally packed. Items I wanted to keep were delivered to my new home. Everything else was donated to local charities that helped people in need. My children had been told I was moving to a senior community for health reasons, which was true enough that they had not questioned it or investigated further. What they did not know was that instead of the modest assisted living facility they had been researching, I was living in what was basically a luxury retirement resort, with my housing completely paid for in full, and a 6-figure salary from the Margaret Thompson Foundation ensuring I would never worry about money again for the rest of my life. I took a sip of my morning coffee. Real expensive good coffee. Not the cheap generic brand I had been buying for years to save money. And I opened the letter that had arrived in yesterday's mail. It was from Robert, written in his precise, neat handwriting. Dear Mom, it read. I hope you are settling in well at your new place. We have not heard from you much since you moved 2 months ago and we are concerned. Linda tried calling last week but only got your voicemail. We would like to visit soon to see how you are doing and make sure you have everything you need. Also, we should probably discuss your financial arrangements. I am worried about how you are managing the costs of your new expensive living situation on your fixed income. Please call me when you get this letter. Love, Robert. I set the letter down next to my morning newspaper, The Oregonian, delivered to my door every day along with the Wall Street Journal and the local community newsletter. Robert's concern about my finances was touching in an ironic way. He had absolutely no idea that my fixed income had increased by roughly 12 times since I had last seen him. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. James's name appeared on the caller ID and I answered with a genuine smile. Good morning, James. Good morning, Margaret. How are you feeling today? Wonderful, I said, and I meant it completely. I just finished reviewing the applications for our new winter clothing program in Eugene. I think we should fund all 4 schools that applied. Even the one with questionable financial record keeping. Especially that one, James laughed. Sometimes the places that look the messiest on paper are exactly where the need is greatest. I learned that from a very wise woman who taught me that cold feet do not wait for perfect paperwork. Smiled. You are never going to let me forget that, are you? Never, he said warmly. All right. All 4 schools it is. Anything else on your agenda today? I am meeting with the architect this afternoon about the new community center. And I have a video conference call with our Seattle office at 2. Oh, and I need to review scholarship applications for next semester. There are so many deserving kids. It still amazed me how full and meaningful my days had become. For years my biggest decisions had been which bills to pay first, and whether I could afford to replace my broken toaster. Now I was making decisions about programs that would help thousands of children and send dozens to college. Margaret, James said. There is something I wanted to tell you. I had an interesting phone call yesterday. Someone contacted my office asking very specific questions about you. Specifically about your employment with the foundation and your mental state. My stomach tightened slightly. What kind of questions exactly? Professional verification questions. Someone wanting to verify your position, your salary, and your mental competency to handle your job responsibilities. I closed my eyes, already knowing the answer. Robert. That would be my guess, James confirmed. My assistant handled it perfectly. Confirmed that you are an active full-time employee in excellent standing with absolutely no concerns about your performance or decision-making abilities. And that was the end of that.